here, db.member.findFirst, like this, where server ID is equal to params.server ID and profile ID is equal to profile.id. So that is the current member, and we're also going to include our profile inside, like this. Perfect. If there is no current member, in that case, something is going wrong, and let's go ahead and redirect from next/navigation to a /page, like this. So I'm just going to move the redirect to the top. Perfect. And after this, let's go ahead and let's get our conversation using our new library. So const conversation is going to be await, get, or create conversation from @/lib/conversation. So I imported that right here, and let me just move it to the top. So get or create conversation, which we just created here. Perfect. Let's go ahead and write get or create conversation and pass in the current member.id as the first ID and pass in the params.member.id as the other user. So this is how that looks in one line. Great. So we are looking at a combination of our currently logged in user and the member that we clicked on, and then we're gonna find the both combinations, whether we initiated that conversation or they initiated it, or if none of those combinations, let's go ahead and create a new one with us as the initiator because we pass in our prop as the first one. Perfect. And now let's go ahead and write if there is no conversation. So if something went wrong here, in that case, we cannot load this page. So we're gonna do a return redirect open pointy bracket /servers, and let's just go to params.server ID, which is going to automatically join the general channel. Perfect. And if we did manage to create a new conversation or find one, in that case, let's extract the member1, the member2 from conversation like this. Perfect. And let's find const other member is equal to member1.profile ID is equal to profile.id, like this. In that case, we are member2, otherwise, sorry, the other member is member2, otherwise it's member1. So basically what we are doing is we are comparing both member1 and member2. We are looking at their profile ID, and if it matches our current profile ID, we are picking the opposite member because I want to get the other member from this two. Perfect. I don't know which one is going to be us and which one is going to be the person we are talking to, right? Because either they could have initiated this conversation or we could have initiated it. If we initiated it, then we are the member one. Otherwise, they are. Since we have no way of knowing that information using this code, what we have to do after we extract those two from our found or created conversation is that we use the member one profile ID, compare it with our own, and if that matches, that means we are member one. So the other member is assigned to member 2. Otherwise, we are the member 1. Great. And now we can go ahead and add a div here with a class name of bg-white. Dark is going to have bg-#313338 like this. Flex-call, and h-full like this. Perfect. And instead of rendering member ID page, you're going to render the chat header from add/components/chat header. And let's pass in the image URL, which is going to be the other member.profile.image URL like this. The name is going to be other member.profile.name like that. Server ID is going to be params.server ID, and type is going to be conversation like this. Perfect. So now if I refresh right here, there we go. My conversation was successfully created and it says Antonio Erdeiras here, but my picture is not showing here because we have to go back inside of the chat header and resolve that. So let me show you what just happened. So I'm going to open a new terminal and I'm going to run npx Prisma Studio here. After I wrote that, I have opened my Prisma Studio inside, and I'm going to go ahead and open my conversations right here. And you can see that a new one was created, having the member one to be, let's see which member. I assume myself. There we go, the admin, which is tied to this profile, and another one, which is the guest. Perfect. So you can check in your Prisma Studio if that was correct. If it wasn't correct, so if you're for some reason not being able to see this name, go ahead and check inside of your terminal, not in the Prisma Studio, so where you're running the application, and scroll up and try to see if there are any error messages here, right? If there are, go ahead and try to debug what just happened. And one piece of advice I might give you, after we've edited our Prisma schema, make sure that you shut down your application and rerun it again. Because even if you do npx prisma generate and db push, there is still cache left in the next cache and all of that stuff. So make sure you shut down the application, run it again, and then try this. So mine worked from the first try. If yours hasn't and you are not able to debug, you can always visit my GitHub and go ahead step by step and see the differences between my what's it called, get or create conversation function, my Prisma schema, and find the differences. And if you still can't do that, you can always jump in my Discord and ask your question there. Everything can be resolved. Perfect. So now that we have this, we can go back and visit our chat header. So let's go ahead and visit our components, chat header here. And now let's finally use this image URL right here. So let's go ahead. And after this type channel hash, let's go ahead and write type is equal conversation. In that case, let's go ahead and write user avatar. And let's import this from /user avatar. And I'm going to change that to /components like this. And go ahead and pass in the source, which is going to be the image URL, and go ahead and give it a class name of h-8, w-8 on MD, keep the same values like this, and margin right off to like this. So let's go ahead and let's refresh this and see if anything changed, and there we go. You can see that now it matches the member that I'm talking to right here in the corner. Perfect. So you can see how now I differentiate between my channels and between my members. And you can also look at the URL. When I'm in a channel, it is /channels channel ID. When I'm in the members, it is /conversation, that specific member ID that I am talking to. Perfect. So for the other user, they're going to have a different URL. They're going to have /conversations and then my user ID, because they are talking to me, right? So they're not going to share the URL, but because of our conversation lib, which we created, we are able to find all kinds of combinations of those two users. Perfect. Great job. So you successfully wrapped up the main functionalities of initiating pages of channels and the members. What we have to do now is we have to implement Socket.io, so we can add a little indicator here in the top whether we are successfully connected to the WebSocket server or not. And regardless if you succeed in doing that or not, it doesn't matter, because then we're going to start doing the messages, and those messages can either work with a successful WebSocket combination, or they can work with polling. So regardless of what your experience is in this next part of the tutorial, which can be a little bit tricky because Next13 has some problems with WebSockets, regardless of that, you will be able to have a real-time-ish experience in this app. Great job so far. So let's go ahead and let's create our Socket.io connection. In order to do that, we're first gonna have to install a couple of packages. So let's shut down our application. I'm also gonna close this Prisma Studio terminal. I no longer need it. And let's go ahead and let's run npm install socket.io like this. And after this has been installed, let's go ahead and immediately install npm socket.io-client like this. So we need one for the server and one for the frontend. Great. And you actually don't need to run your application right now because we're going to do some coding. So let's go ahead and let's create a new folder. So outside of everything, we're going to create a new folder called Pages. So Pages is an old way of routing with Next12, but since Next13 app router still has some issues with Socket.io, we're gonna leverage the fact that this Pages folder is still supported, and in here we're gonna go and initialize our IO connection. And you don't have to worry about Pages being deprecated or something. So Next13 is still in an early transition, and I am sure that because of all the legacy code and applications, the pages folder will be supported for a very long time, so you don't have to worry. And when an update comes that Socket.io is able to be done in the app folder, I'm gonna create instructions on how to do that. But for now, using the pages folder is perfectly fine for this solution. So let's go inside of this pages folder, create a new folder called API, and inside go ahead and create another folder called Socket. Inside of this Socket folder, create a file io.ts like this. So that's going to be our route /API/sockets/io. So in the pages folder, we don't use the route.ts. Instead, we name our file as we want our route to be. Great. So let's go ahead and let's import server as net server from HTTP. Let's import next API request from next like this, and let's import server as server IO from socket.io like this. And now let's save this file, and before we continue, let's go inside of our types.ts file where we have this server with members with profiles, and let's go ahead and add some other imports here. So I'm gonna add import server as net server and socket from net like this, and let's import next API response from next like this, and let's also import server as socket.io server from socket.io. So we're gonna create a custom response type so we can use it inside of this pages route. Perfect. So let's go ahead and let's write export type next API response server IO is equal to next API response and socket, which is a type of socket, and server is a type of net server, and inside we have an IO, which is socket IO server like this. Perfect. So now that we have that, we can head back into our io.ts file inside of the pages API socket folder right here, and let's import next API response server IO from /types like this. Let's go ahead and turn off the body parser for this route. So export const config API body parser is false like this. And now let's write const IO handler to have a request of next API request like this, and the response of next API response server IO like this. Let's open an arrow function, and first let's check if we already have a REST socket server IO. So we are only going to write this code if there is no, so put an exclamation point, if there is no response.socket.server.io like this. And then let's go ahead and write const path to be /API/socket/IO like that. Const HTTP server is a type of net server, and it's a type of rest.socket.server as any like this. And now let's write const IO is equal to new server IO, in the first argument passing the HTTP server like this, and in the second one going ahead and pass the path to be path and add trailing slash to be false. Now, I am not exactly sure why, but this property is throwing me a TypeScript error, but I've seen in other projects it doesn't, and I've also confirmed that it's not due to the version I have. So I'm not sure if you're gonna have this TypeScript error or not. I have it, so what I'm gonna do is add a comment ts-ignore like this, because this is actually working for me. There is a difference if I add this and if I don't add this. So it's not true that this doesn't exist as a property here. You can even go ahead and look at the types inside. I think we have this server options inside, which extends the engine options. Let's go ahead and see if I can look at this, and somewhere inside you should have the trailing slash. Well, I cannot find it right now, but when I looked at myself, it was somewhere inside, but for some reason it's not being passed here. So again, I don't know if you're gonna have this error or not, but make sure you have the add trailing slash false. So don't misspell it because you don't have TypeScript autocomplete here. And let's just write response.socket.server.io to be IO like that. Perfect. And at the end, response.end like this. And export default IO handler like that. Perfect. So we have our API ready to connect to the socket IO. And now let's go ahead and close this and let's go inside of our components providers and create a new file inside called socket-provider.tsx like that. Go ahead and mark this as use client like that. Go ahead and import create context, use effect, and use state from React like this. And go ahead and import IO as client IO from socket.io-client. Now let's create the type for our context. So type socket context type is going to be a socket of type any or null like this, and is connected is going to be a boolean like that. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and write the actual socket context. So const socket context is equal to create context with the type of socket context type, which we just created above, and it's going to be an object with a default value of socket null and is connected of false like this. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and let's export a hook where we are going to use this context. So export const use socket is an arrow function which just returns use context and passing the socket context like this. Great. And now let's actually write the socket provider. So go ahead and write export const socket provider. So just make sure you export this constant as well as this one. And let's go ahead and let's pass in the children. Sorry, let's extract the children like this. And let's go ahead and give them a type of children.react.react node like that. So we can actually collapse this like that, just so it's easier to look at. And go ahead and return this component where we're going to add a constant socket and set socket from use state, and default is going to be null. Const is connected and set is connected of use state false like this. And now let's write a use effect which we have imported. Don't forget the dependency array here. Whoops. And inside, let's go ahead and let's add const socket instance, the new client IO as any. So open it in brackets like this. Go ahead and open brackets again. Process.environment.next underscore public underscore site underscore URL with a question with an exclamation point. So I just want to quickly explain that this next public site URL is localhost by default in development. So that's why we don't add anything inside of our environment file. But later, when we deploy, we are going to change this next public site URL to match our deployment URL at the end. So this is all supposed to be one line like that. And then go ahead and pass in the options like this. So I'm going to zoom in back. The path is going to be /API/socket/IO, and add trailing slash is going to be false like that. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and let's add the connect and disconnect events. So socket instance.on connect, pass in the arrow function, set is connected to true like this, and socket instance dot on disconnect like this is going to be an arrow function which set is connected to false like this. Then at the bottom we're going to go ahead and write set socket instance like this, and return an arrow function socket instance dot disconnect, whoops, like this. Perfect. And let's just go ahead and return a socket context dot provider like that, and render the children inside, and go ahead and pass in the value of socket and is connected like this. Perfect. So now we have this provider. Now let's go ahead inside of our app folder, inside of our main layout right here, and let's go ahead and wrap everything inside of this theme provider in a socket provider. So socket provider from add/components/providers/socket-provider, and wrap in the model provider as well as the children like this. Perfect. And make sure you imported socket provider from add/components-provider-socket-provider. So now let's go ahead and let's create a socket indicator, which is going to be inside of this corner right here, which is either going to be green or orange, depending on if our connection was successful or not. So in order to do that, let's go ahead and open our terminal. And we have to add a new component from ShadCN called badge. So let's go ahead and find the badge component right here, and let's go ahead and copy this for npm like that. I'm gonna paste that here. So npx ShadCN UI at latest add badge. Great. So go ahead and press enter and just wait a couple of seconds and then confirm it, of course, and there we go. And now you can npm run dev your application. And let's go ahead now and let's create our socket indicator. So I'm going to close everything here. I'm going inside of my components, and inside I'm going to create a new file, socket-indicator.tsx, like this. Let's mark this as use client like that. And let's import use socket from /providers socket provider, but I'm just going to change it to /components like that. And let's import badge from add/components/UI/badge, which we just added. Perfect. Export const socket provider, whoops, socket indicator, my apologies, is going to use the is connected status from use socket, which we imported. If we are not connected, in that case, let's go ahead and return a badge like this with a fallback of polling every 1 second, and let's go ahead and give it a variant of outline and the class name, whoops, and the class name of bg-yellow-600 text-white and border-none, like this. Perfect. And you can go ahead and copy this return function and move it outside of this if clause. So this is going to be if we are connected, and instead of using bg yellow, we're going to use bg emerald like this. So let me just collapse this too, so you can see that better, like that. So all in one line. I'm going to do the same thing here like that. Okay, and let's just change the text inside of this one, which is going to be live real-time updates like this. Perfect. And now let's go inside of our components, chat header right here. And let's go ahead and find the end of this paragraph, add a new div with a class name of ml-auto flex and items-center, and inside render the socket indicator like this, which we just created. So socket indicator, and I'm going to change it to components like this. Perfect. So let's see what's going on here. Now I'm going to refresh. Make sure you do npm run dev to start your application. And let's see if we're going to have any errors. So right now it says fallback polling every second, and there we go. Mine has successfully connected. So it's normal that in the first few seconds it doesn't connect, and you can go ahead and check your network tab to confirm that you're not having any additional errors for your socket. So let me just find the socket or IO perhaps. Let me refresh and see if that's going to work. And there we go. You can see that my IO connections are not failing. And let me show you how it will look if something goes wrong. So if you have a mismatch between your API routes. So I'm gonna go inside of my components, providers, socket provider right here. So if I wrote an invalid URL here, let's add a typo here. And if I attempt to refresh, there we go. You can see that now it says fallback, and in my network tab, you can see that I'm having errors. So double check that your paths are correct. Double check that you have add trailing slash. So this path API socket IO needs to match the server one. This next public site URL doesn't matter now because locally that's default localhost, but later when we deploy, we're gonna have to change it. And also, let's go ahead and check the IO in our paths. So make sure that in your pages API, you also have a matching API route, and also add the add trailing slash right here. Perfect. Great job. So you successfully created the connection to socket IO, and now we can go ahead and start developing the chat component. Again, if you try your best, if you copy my code and it still doesn't work, it could be that it's just a specific issue with your firewall or something like that, but you don't have to worry because you can still continue the tutorial because we are going to have live polling as well as a fallback. So let's go ahead and let's create our chat input, which is going to be right here at the bottom. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to do that first for the channels. So pick a channel like general or new text. Make sure you are inside of a channel, and let's close everything here. Let's go inside of the app folder, inside of main folder, routes, channels, channel ID, page.tsx like this. And below the chat header, add a div, which is going to say future messages. So we're not going to have them yet. And give this div a class name of flex-1 like this. So it takes up all the space. And at the bottom, go ahead and add a chat input component like this. And if you save, you're going to get an error because chat input does not exist yet. So let's go inside of our components folder, inside of the chat folder, and create a new file, chat-input.tsx like this. Let's go ahead and let's mark this as use client, and let's do a quick export const chat input like this, and return a div chat input just like that. Go back inside of the channel ID page and now import the chat input from add/component/chat/chat input, so you can keep this header and input together like this. Perfect. And now if you save, there we go. So I have a space taking up future messages, and at the bottom I have a chat input. Perfect. Let's go ahead now and let's add this chat input some props. So interface chat input props is going to have an API URL, which is a string. It's going to have a query, which is going to be a record of string and any. It's going to have a name, which is a string, and a type, which can be either conversation, if it's a one-on-one, or a channel. So we're going to reuse this chat input for both one-on-one communication and on the channels communication. So that's why we are making this as modular as possible, making it able to pass different API URL and the relevant query so that we can reuse it in different places. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and let's import all as z from Zod like this. And let's go ahead and quickly write the form schema. So const form schema is going to be z.object like that, which takes in the content, which is z.string with a minimum value of 1. And no need to do any custom error messages because we're not going to display error messages in the chat input. So now let's go ahead and let's extract all of those props here. So we're going to have the API URL, the query, the name, and the type like this. And let's just assign the props. So chat input props like this. Perfect. Now let's go back inside of the page. So the channel page here where we render the chat input, and let's give it all of those props. So name is going to be channel.name like that. Type is going to be channel. API URL is going to be /API/socket/messages. So we are going to create that route later. Right now it doesn't exist yet, but we are just preparing it. And the query that this route is going to need is going to be an object which has the channel ID, which is channel.id, and a server ID, which is channel.server ID, like this. Perfect. So now we no longer have any type errors. And now let's go ahead and let's create our form hook here. So const form is equal to use form from react-hook-form. Make sure you import that. Okay. And inside, before you open it, go ahead and give it a type of z.infer, open pointy brackets again, type of form schema, like that. And inside, go ahead and add a default values of content to be an empty string. Perfect. Now let's add a resolver, which is going to match this form schema. So go ahead and then import Zod resolver from add hookform/resolvers/Zod, like that. Perfect. Let's go ahead and add a resolver here. So resolver single one is going to be Zod resolver. Actually, I'm typing this inside of default values. My apologies. So outside of default values, resolver is going to be Zod resolver form schema, like this, and add a comma. There we go. So our form hook is ready now. And let's go ahead and write const is loading to be form dot form state is submitting, like that. And let's write const on submit to be an asynchronous function which has values which are a type of z.infer, type of form schema, like that, and just log the values for now. So lowercase v, like that. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and let's import everything we need for our form. So import form, form control, form field, and form item from add/components/UI/form, like this. And let's also go ahead and import input from add/components/UI/input, like this. Perfect. So let's go ahead and let's start styling our form now. So go all the way to the return function, return this div, remove this div, and write form. Go ahead and spread the form constant which we have from this hook right here. Inside, add a native HTML form element and write on submit to be form.handle_submit, and wrap our on submit inside so we have access to these values inside. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and let's write a single form field, which is a self-closing tag, like that. Go ahead and give it a control of form.control, like that. Go ahead and give it a name of content and give it a render. Go ahead and destructure the field, like that, and immediately return a form item, like this. Perfect. Inside of the form item, go ahead and return the form control, like this. And now let's add a div with a class name of relative p-4 and pb-6, like that. Perfect. Inside of here, let's go ahead and let's create a button element here, which is going to be a type of button. So, okay, let's do it like that. Give it a type of button. That's important, so it doesn't accidentally get triggered when we press enter. On click can for now just be an empty arrow function, and give this button a class name of the following. So let's go ahead and let's write absolute, like this, top-7, left-8, like that, height 24 pixels, width 24 pixels as well, bg-sync-500 on dark mode. It's gonna be bg-sync-400. On hover, we're gonna change it to bg-sync-600, like this. On dark hover, so dark hover, it's gonna have a let's see, bg-sync-300 is gonna have a transition class, rounded-full p-1 flex, items dash center like this, and justify dash center like that. Perfect. And inside we are going to render the plus icon from Lucid React, which is gonna have a class name of text dash white. Dark is gonna be text dash and open a hex code 3133338 like this. So make sure you have plus imported from Lucid React, and I'm just gonna move it to the top right here. Okay, so right now the only thing you should have is this plus sign, but we're gonna change that a bit. Okay, let's scroll down right here. So outside of this button, go ahead and add our input component, which is a self-closing tag. It's going to be disabled on is loading, which we have as a constant. And now let's give this a class name of px-14, py-6 like this, bg-sync-200/90. On dark mode, it's going to be bg-sync/700/75, border-none, border-0, focus-visible, ring-0 like that. It's also going to be focus-visible, ring-offset-0 like that. Text-sync-600, and on dark mode, text-sync-200 like that. Perfect. So now if you take a look, we have a beautiful input form right here. Great. So this button is going to be used to open a model to upload a file message, so either an image or a PDF file, but we're going to do that later. What I want to do now is actually try this out. So one more thing I just want to do is after this input, I'm going to create a div, and I'm going to go ahead and give it a class name of absolute top-7 and right-8 like this. And what I'm going to do inside is I'm just going to add a smile icon from Lucid React like this. So make sure you imported this as well. Great. So this smile icon is going to be our trigger for an emoji model, but we don't have that yet. For now, what I want to do is actually test this out to see if if we are actually logging these values. So I'm going to go ahead and try. This is my message like that, and let's just press, and it seems to not be logging my values. So okay, let's take a look if we passed everything we need in this input. Perhaps we are missing, I think I know what I forgot to add. Yes, so I only added a class name to this input. After the class name, I also need to add the placeholder, which we forgot about. So the placeholder is going to be quite dynamic. I'm going to zoom out a bit just so you can see it in one line. So open pointy brackets like this, and go ahead and write message, and then open a special object. If type is equal to conversation, in that case, render the name of that user that we're texting. Otherwise, go ahead and render a hashtag plus the name of the channel that we are texting like that. So let's take a look at it now. I'm going to remove this message here, and there we go. Now it says message/general. If I go here, it says message new. If I go here, it says message edited audio. This of course is not going to exist for the audio. It's going to be in a different way. For members, it doesn't yet exist. We have to add it in that page separately. So let's focus on the channels now. Perfect. And one more thing we have to add to the input is we have to spread the field like this. Perfect. So now it should be working in my inspect element right here. I'm going to try, this is my message like that. Let me just clear this and press enter. There we go. Content, this is my message. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and let's actually submit that message to an API request. So let's go ahead and let's import Axios from Axios, and let's import QS from query-string like this. Perfect. Let's go back inside of our onSubmit function here. Let's change this to be a try and catch block. Let's get the error and let's console log the error like that. And in the finally, actually no finally here, my apologies. So in the try block, now go ahead and write const URL is going to be qs.stringify URL. The URL base is going to be our prop API URL, which you can see in our page, is /API/socket/messages, like that. And in the query, we're just going to pass the query, which in our case is going to be this channel ID and server ID. Perfect. And now let's go ahead and await Axios.post URL and values, like that. Perfect. And make sure you name the prop values like this so you don't get an error like I have. Perfect. And what I expect now in my inspect element is a 404 error. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to press enter. And there we go. We have a 404 not find. So now let's go ahead and let's create that route so we can finally create our first message. So now let's go ahead and let's create our failing API route, which is currently returning a 404. So if you take a look at our channel page file, you're gonna know that it goes to /API/socket/messages. So maybe you already guessed that we're gonna do that inside, not inside of the app router, but inside of the pages folder. So let me just find the pages folder. There we go. So we're gonna do it inside of the pages folder, API socket, inside of here. So we have access to this response, which can accept sockets, so we can send it back to all connected users. So let's go inside of pages, API socket.io, and inside create a new file, messages.ts, like this. Perfect. So let's go ahead and write that now. But before we continue, let's actually go ahead and create a new lib. So we have a lib called current profile, but this current profile, due to its nature, will not work inside of the pages folder. So what we have to do is we have to modify it to work for pages folder. So go ahead and copy that and paste it and rename it current-profile-pages. So we know it's only for the pages folder. And we can no longer use this out from Clerk Next.js. Instead, we have to use get out from /Clerk Next.js/server, like this. And then we can go ahead and use get out like this, but we have to pass in the request. So let's get the request from this param next API request from the next package, like this, and pass in the request inside. And everything else can stay the same. So we just replaced the auth and we have to pass in the request because that's the way the pages folder work. Perfect. So we have this new thing now, and now we can go back inside of pages API socket messages right here. So let's go ahead and let's write export default asynchronous function handler, like that. And this function is going to have the request of next API request from next and the response of next API response server IO from our custom types, like this. Perfect. Now inside, let's go ahead and write if. Let me just zoom in. So if request.method is not post, like this, in that case, return res.status 405.json, like this, error, method not allowed, like this, allowed. Okay. And now let's go ahead and open a try and catch block. So first let's resolve the catch. So catch error, like this. Let's console log messages underscore post. And let's just pass in the error like this, and let's return response.status 500.json with a message internal error, like this. Perfect. So now we can go back inside of our try block and let's write const profile is equal await current profile pages, like that. And yeah, let's also go back inside of our lib folder current profile pages, and let's just rename this to current profile pages as well, so we don't accidentally import it from this one, which is used for the app folder. So I'm just gonna close those, and let's go ahead and import the current profile pages from /lib current profile dash pages, like that. And let's go ahead and pass in the request, like that. Perfect. And let's also immediately destructure the content and the potential file URL from request.body, like that. And let's also go ahead and get the server ID and channel ID from request.query like this. Perfect. Let's go ahead and let's check if we don't have a profile. So if there is no profile, in that case, you can go ahead and return rest.status 401.json with an error unauthorized like that. Perfect. So let's go ahead and copy and paste this. And let's check the same thing for server ID. So if there is no server ID, status is 400 and error is server ID missing like that. Let's copy and paste this. And let's do this one for channel ID. So the error is going to be channel ID missing. Let's copy it again. And this one is going to be for the missing content. So if there is no content, in that case, content missing like that. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and let's import our database util. So import db from @/libdb like that. Let's go below this check for content and let's go ahead and get our server. So const server is equal await db.server.find first like this, where ID is server ID as string, members is sum, profile ID is equal to profile.id. So we are just confirming that the user trying to send this message is actually a part of this server. And let's go ahead and let's include the members like that. Perfect. So if there is no server, in that case, return rest.status 404.json with a message of server not found. So message server not found like this. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and let's find the channel. So const channel is equal await db.channel.find first, where ID is channel ID as string like that, and server ID is server ID is server ID as string, and instead of semicolons we are using commas like that. And let's just copy and paste this check for the server. So if there is no channel, it's a 404 message saying channel not found like this. And now let's go ahead and let's try to find the member. So const member is equal to server.members.find, get the individual member like that, if member.profile ID is matching the current profile.id like that. So we find one member. Perfect. And let's go ahead and copy this again. If there is no such member, so if in the entire member list of the server we could not find one that matches our profile ID, let's go ahead and return member not found, because that is not a part of our server. Perfect. And now let's go ahead and finally create the message. So const message is going to be equal to await db.message.create data is going to be content, file URL, channel ID, which is going to be channel ID as string like this, member ID, which is going to be this member which we found in this constant, so member.id like that. And let's go ahead and let's include member like that, and let's also include profile true like this. Perfect. And now we can already just do this, return response.status of 200.json message like that. But I also want to do something else. I want to immediately emit a socket IO to all the active connections. So the way I'm going to do that is by creating a unique channel key. So const channel key is going to be open backticks chat, open colons, open an object, channel ID, comma, colon messages like this. Perfect. So we are going to watch this channel key also when we create a hook for watching socket messages on the front end. So we're gonna get back to this constant later to confirm that you don't do any typos here. And let's just do response question mark socket question mark server question mark IO dot question mark dot emit. Let's pass in the channel key as the first argument and the new message as the second argument. There we go. And now let's go ahead and let's open our Prisma Studio so we can watch our newly created message, because currently there is no other way. So npx Prisma Studio like this. And I'm gonna go ahead and open my message table right here. As you can see, it's currently empty. So let's now try. I'm also gonna open inspect element here just to confirm there are no errors when I type. So hello there, let's send. It seems to be working because this was disabled. Okay. And let's go ahead and let's look at our Prisma Studio where I have the message. And let's see if a new one was there. And there we go. Content is hello there. We have the member ID. We have the connection to the member, channel ID. The deleted status is false. Everything seems to be working fine. Great. Now let's go ahead and create a model for uploading file messages. So let's go ahead and let's create this pop-up right here, which is going to enable us to send file messages. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go inside of hooks, use model store right here. And inside of this use model store, we're going to have to add a new model type, which is going to be message file like this. And we're also going to have to add an API URL, which is going to be an optional string, and a query, which is going to be an optional record of string and any inside of this model data right here. Perfect. So now let's go ahead and let's find the most appropriate model we can copy. So inside of models, the model I want to copy is the initial model because it already has the drop zone inside. So copy the initial model. And let's go ahead and let's rename this to message-file-model.tsx like this. So make sure you are inside of message file model here. Let's go ahead and let's rename it to message file model like that. And now what we have to do is change a little bit of how it works. So first things first, let's go ahead and remove this use effect for mounting. Let's go ahead and remove this state for is mounted, and let's remove this if clause for if it is mounted. Perfect. And now above this use router, let's go ahead and add const is open on close type and data from use model from /hooks use model store. So make sure you add this hooks use model store import here. Perfect. And now let's go ahead and let's create a constant is model open to be is open, and type needs to be message file like this. And then we're going to use this is model open to handle our open status. So let's change this dialog open to not be hard coded, but to use is model open. And now let's go ahead and let's create our const handle close function. So handle close like that, which is going to reset the form and call the on close, which we extracted from the use model here. And now let's go ahead and go to our dialog and add on open change to be handle close like this. Perfect. So of course we're gonna have to modify it even more, but for now, this is enough for us to go inside of the components providers, model provider right here, and add the message file model from /models message file model. And I'm just going to change it to /components like this. There we go. So add the message file model. And now we can go ahead inside of our chat input here. So components chat input, go ahead and the structure on open from use model. So we have to import that use model from /hooks use model store. So make sure you have this new import right here inside of the chat input. And then let's find the button, which we have an empty handler on, and let's replace this to call on open message file. And the data it needs is going to be the AP URL and the query like this. So make sure you pass in both of those. Perfect. And now let's go ahead and let's already try this out. So if I click here, there we go. I have this initial model opening. Perfect. So now we'll keep it opened make sure you pass in both the API URL and the query, that it is the correct model, and I can close this and I can go inside of components, models, message file model right here. Perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the name from the form schema, so we're not going to need that. And I'm also gonna go ahead and change the title right here. So instead of customize your server, it's going to be add an attachment like this. And I'm going to change this description to be send a file as a message like this. I'm gonna go to this form right here, and I'm gonna find where is the form field that renders the input for the server name. And I'm going to delete that entire form field. So let me zoom out so you can see. So leave this form field with the file upload, but remove this form field with the form item, label, and an input like this. So remove that entire thing and just zoom in. There we go. Let's change the button from create to send like that. And now let's go ahead and let's change this file upload endpoint to use the message file. So if you remember, in the file upload, we are either allowing a message file or a server image. That is because inside of our core file upload thing router, we allow server image, which only accepts an image, but for our message file, we accept both an image or a PDF. So you can see the text here change to images and PDFs. Perfect. So let's go back inside of our message file model here right now. And let's go ahead and let's change our onSubmit function here. So it's going to be a little bit different, and we have to go ahead and let's actually remove this use effect. We're not going to need it. Let's remove the form message and form label, and let's remove the input import. Perfect. And instead, let's go ahead and let's import QS from query-string like this. Perfect. Inside of the onSubmit function right now, we're gonna go ahead and generate our URL. So const URL is equal to qs.stringify URL like that. And let me just expand my screen a bit. Okay, so stringify URL. Inside, passing the URL to be API URL, but we don't have it yet because we have to destructure it from our data. So let's find our data right here. We have it from the use model, and let's go ahead and let's extract API URL and query from the data like this. Perfect. So now we can go back inside of this onSubmit function and add a pipe empty string here, because it's a possibility that this API URL has not been passed. Let's also pass in the query like that. And after that is done, let's go ahead and write axios.post like this. Instead of this, we're gonna add this newly generated URL using query string like this. And let's go ahead and spread the values like that and add content manually to be values.file URL like this. There we go. And let's just see. Okay, yes. Let's go ahead and rename the form schema image URL to file URL. And let's change the server image is required to attachment is required for a proper message. And let's also do the same thing in default values. We don't need the name. And let's change this to file URL. There we go. And now in here, we should no longer have this error for the content right here. And we no longer need the window.location.reload. Instead, we can call the onClose function, which we have right here, destructured from the use model. Perfect. And let's just go ahead and change this name to be file URL like this. Perfect. So let's go ahead and let's try that out now. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna select an image right here, which is my YouTube profile picture. And after I click send right here, let's see if it's going to close the model. So this would indicate that it is successful. So I'm going to refresh right here, and I sent a couple of messages, so don't get scared. I have a lot of messages, but there we go. This is my newest file, which uses the upload thing and has a file URL here. So let me just go ahead and remove all of my messages. You don't have to do this, but I just want to demonstrate to you that it's working. So I'm going to refresh here. This Prisma Studio, there we go, no messages inside. Let's just wait a second for it to load, no messages. But if I go ahead And well, you know what? Let's do this. Let's actually go back. Let's find our onSubmit function, and instead of using onClose, let's use handle close. So this is going to reset our form as well, like that. So we have handle closed reset written here. Perfect. Okay, let's try again. So I'm gonna go ahead and upload my profile picture from YouTube. I'm gonna go ahead and click send like this, and let's go ahead and refresh this. And in a couple of seconds, there we go. So now you can see the file URL right here. Perfect. And one thing I want to bring your attention to is that we currently don't have a way to display PDF files. So I'm going to upload a PDF file in here, and you're going to see that we see nothing is happening. We successfully uploaded it, but nothing is happening. So what we have to do is we have to go back to our file upload component. So I'm going to close everything. I'm going to go inside of components, inside of file-upload right here. And we have a solution for rendering images, right? But we don't have a solution for rendering PDF files. So go below this if clause right here. And let's go ahead and render if there is a value and if file type is equal to PDF. In that case, return a div, and let's go ahead and let's give this div a class name of relative flex items-center p-2 margin top-2 like this, rounded-md bg-background/10 like that. Inside, render a file icon from Lucid React. So make sure you have file icon imported from Lucid React like this. Let's give this file icon a class name of h-10 w-10 fill-indigo-200 stroke-indigo-400 like that. And inside, add an href like this. And the href is going to point to value like that. Okay, let's give it a target of _blank so it opens in a new file, and let's give it a rel of no opener like this, no referrer like that, and let's give it a class name of ml-2 text-sm like this. So you can already see some progress here. Text-indigo-500 dark text-indigo text-indigo-400 whoops, and hover underline like this. Okay, and inside we're going to render the value like this. There we go. Perfect. And we also have to add a delete button. So I'm just gonna copy this button from my if clause to render the image, and I'm gonna paste it below this href here like that. And let's just modify it a little bit. So I'm going to use -top2, and I'm going to use -right2 like this to position it just a little bit better. So let's take a look at this now, and there we go. So now you can click to open this file, and you can also remove it like that. So perfect. Now I can add a PDF file, for example, and I can upload that as well safely. And let's click send like that. And in my Prisma Studio, I should have a new message now, which successfully has my PDF file. Perfect. So you have finished the file upload configuration. Now we just have to do the little emoji thing. Great job so far. So let's go ahead and let's create this emoji pop-up right here. So first thing we have to do is we have to add a popover from Shadcn UI. So let's go ahead and let's find the popover component right here. Let's go ahead and copy the installation, and let's go ahead and install it in our terminal. So I'm going inside of my terminal here, and I'm going to shut down the Prisma Studio. I'm going to shut down my application, and there we go. And npx Shadcn UI latest add popover like this. Confirm the installation by pressing Y, and after that is done, we're gonna have to install our emoji package. So go ahead and run the following: npm install emoji-mart at emoji-mart/data, and at emoji-mart/react. So let me zoom out so you can see it in one line. npm install emoji-mart at emoji-mart data and at emoji-mart react, like that. And go ahead and press enter. And after all of this has been installed, go ahead and npm run dev your application again. Great. So let's go ahead and let's find where in our chat input we have this little message right here. So refresh your application, of course, and let's go inside of components, chat input right here. Let's find this smile icon and let's replace it with emoji picker like this. And don't import it from anywhere. So just save the file and you should get an error because we don't have this emoji picker anywhere. So now let's go ahead and let's create it. I'm going to close everything. I'm going inside of my components and create a new file, emoji-picker.tsx, like this. Perfect. And now let's just go ahead and mark this as use client, like that. And let's export const emoji picker, like that. And let's return a div saying emoji, like that. Let's go back inside of our chat input, and now we can safely import the emoji picker from /emoji picker, and I'm going to replace that to /components, like that. And the error should go away, and now we have a text saying emoji here. Great. So let's go back to the emoji picker component inside, and let's go ahead and write an interface. So interface emoji picker props is gonna have onChange value, which is a string, and a void, like that. So go ahead and extract the onChange from here and map it to emoji picker props, like this. Great. Now let's go ahead and let's import everything we need from the popover component. So import the following from @components/UI/popover, which we just added. So popover content, and popover trigger, like this. Great. Instead of rendering a div, we're going to render a popover component, like that, and go ahead and add popover trigger component. And inside, render a smile icon from Lucid React. So make sure to add this import. I'm gonna move it to the top, like that. And let's go ahead and give this smile a class name of text-sync, and it is a self-closing tag. So let's just make sure we close it. So text-sync-500 on dark mode is going to be text-sync-400. On hover, it's going to use text-sync-600. On dark hover, it's going to use text-sync-300, like that, and it's going to have a transition class, like this. There we go. So now we have our emoji icon back, and you can see how it has a nice hover effect. Perfect. Outside of the popover trigger, go ahead and add the popover content, which we have imported. And go ahead and give it a side of right, like that. Give it a side offset of 40. And let's just go ahead and render these underneath each other, like this. And let's go ahead and give it a class name of bg-transparent, like that. Border-none. Shadow-none, drop-shadow-none, and margin bottom of 16, like that. And inside, we are going to render a picker. We're going to render a picker from emoji-mart react. So before we do that, let's actually import that here. So let's import directly picker from @emoji-mart/react. Let's import data from @emoji-mart/data, like this. And let's also just prepare use theme from next/themes, like that. We're going to use it in a moment. Great. Let's go back inside of the popover content and let's add our picker, which is a self-closing tag, like that. And let's go ahead and let's give it the data of data. Let's give it an onEmoji select, like this, to get an emoji, which is a type of string, like this, and onChange emoji.native. So this is actually not a string. Let's give it an any like that. So let me zoom out. So on emoji select like that, get this emoji object and call the onChange function with emoji.native, which holds the string like this. So let's save this and let's see if this is working right here. So once I click here, there we go, I have an emoji popping up. Perfect. But one thing that doesn't work is when I switch to light mode, it is still in dark mode. So let's go ahead and resolve that. So switch to light mode if you prefer, and go ahead and add a const resolved theme from use theme, which we imported just a moment ago. And now use this resolved theme and give it to this picker here. So theme is resolved theme like that. Perfect. And I'm just going to refresh. And now there we go. Now it's white. And if I go ahead in dark, now it's dark. Perfect. And I think that I'm seeing a little drop shadow here. So let me just see if I can resolve that. Yes, so I have a shadow dash none instead of none as it should be like that. And I think that's gonna resolve that little shadow. There we go, perfect. And all we have to do now is actually add some functionality, because right now when I select, I have an error. So let's go ahead and let's go back to our chat input component. So components chat input right here. And on this emoji picker, go ahead and give it an onChange like this. Get the emoji, which is a string like that, and do a field.onChange. So I'm just going to zoom out so you can see it in one line. Field.onChange, and go ahead and open backticks, reuse the current field value, and then just render an emoji next to it like that. So emoji field onChange, what is the current value, and add a space and just an emoji like that. So let's go ahead and write test. Let's click here, let's click somewhere, and there we go. You can see that an emoji has appeared here. Perfect. And now I can send that message and it is going to have an emoji. Perfect. Great job. And while we are here, let's also reset this form once we send the message, because right now I submitted a message, but this stayed here. So let's just quickly go inside of our onSubmit function here, and after the Axios post, let's go ahead and let's do form.reset like that. And let's go ahead and let's add a router. So const router, use router from next/navigation. So make sure you add this import for next/navigation. I'm gonna move it to the top, and you can remove this import for Smile. And what I'm going to do is also call router.refresh like this. Great. So now if I try and write a message, this is a message, and after I submit and it's successful, it's cleared. That's exactly what I want. Perfect. We are now ready to render our messages. So let's go ahead and let's finally render some messages, or at least prepare the chat messages component. So we have to go all the way back to our app folder, main, routes, servers, server ID, channels, channel ID page right here. And we can now remove this div which says future messages, and instead we can render the chat messages like this. If you save, you're of course going to get an error, so just make sure to refresh the page so you have this error visible. And now let's go inside of our components folder inside of chat and create a new file, chat-messages.tsx like that. Let's go ahead and let's mark this as use client, and let's just do an export const chat messages like that and return a div saying chat messages. There we go. Now go back inside of the channel page and just import that from add/components/chat/chat messages. So the same way we did for the chat header input, and now chat messages. And if you save, the error should go away. So let's go back inside of this component now, and let's write an interface that we need. So interface chat messages props. It's gonna have a name, which is a string. It's going to have a member, which is a type of member from @prisma/client. It's going to have a chat ID, which is a string. It's going to have API URL, which is also a string, a socket URL, which is a string, a socket query, which is going to be a record of string and string, like that, a param key, which can either be channel ID or conversation ID, like that, and param value, which is a string, and a type, which can be either channel or conversation. So we need all of this information to create a modular chat messages component, which can be reused both in one-on-one conversations and in channel conversations. Perfect. So now let's go ahead and let's extract all of those values here. So I'm gonna go ahead and write name, member, chat ID, API URL, socket URL, socket query, param key, param value, and type, like this. And let's assign all of those to chat messages props like this, and you should have no errors. Perfect. Now let's go back to the page.tsx right here, and let's go ahead and give it all of those values. So member is going to be the current member, which we have. Name is going to be channel.name. Type is going to be channel, because we are in channel ID page. For the conversation, we are obviously going to change it to conversation. API URL is going to be /API/messages. So this is where we're going to fetch our messages from. And then socket URL is going to be /API/socket/messages. So this is going to be where we are triggering new messages. Great. And now socket query is going to be channel ID with channel.id and server ID with with channel.server ID, like that. Param key is going to be channel ID, like that, and param value is going to be channel.id, like this. Perfect. And let's just change, but after name, let's also add a chat ID to be channel.id, like that. There we go. So member, name, chat ID, type, API URL, socket URL, socket query, param key, and param value. And now you should have no errors here. Perfect. So let's go inside of chat messages now, and let's go ahead and let's give this div a class name of flex-1. So it takes up all of the space. flex-call, py-4, and overflow-y -auto, like that. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and let's replace this text chat messages with a self-closing div. So it's going to be a self-closing div with a class name of flex-1, like that. And then below that div, we're going to render chat welcome, like this. We don't have that, so we're going to get an error. Chat welcome is going to have a type of type and the name of name, like that. So let's go ahead and let's create the chat welcome now. So inside of chat components, create a chat-welcome.tsx. Let's go ahead and let's write export const chat welcome, like this, and return a div chat welcome, like that. Go back to your chat messages, and now you can import chat welcome from /chat welcome, and I'm just gonna keep it separated, and no need to transform it in @/components because they are in the same folder. Great. And now let's assign these types inside of the new chat welcome component, which is right now right here at the bottom. Great. So let's go ahead and write an interface here. So interface chat welcome props, like that, are going to be name, which is a string, and type, which can either be a channel or a conversation, like that. So even that is going to be dynamic. Now let's go ahead and extract both of those, so name and type, and let's map them to the props, chat welcome props, like that. Perfect. And you should now no longer have these errors in the chat messages component. Great. Now let's go ahead and let's give this div a class name. So class name space -y-2 px-4 and margin bottom -4. Let's remove this text now, and let's write type is channel. In that case, go ahead and render a div with a class name of h dash open square brackets 75 pixels, w dash 75 pixels as well, rounded dash full bg dash sync dash 500. On dark mode it's going to be bg dash sync dash 700. It's going to be a flex items dash center and justify dash center as well. And inside, go ahead and render a hash from Lucid React. So make sure you have this import. And let's give this hash a class name of h-12, w-12, and text-white, like that. There we go. So now you can see that we have a nice little hashtag here because this is a channel. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and let's go below that and let's add a paragraph here with the class name of text-xl, md, text-3xl, and font-bold, like that. And inside, we're going to dynamically render using type equals channel. If that is the case, we're going to write welcome to and a hashtag. Otherwise, we are going to just not render anything, and then we're going to render the name. So this is going to say welcome to /general, but when we can go to one-on-one conversations, it's just going to say the name of the person we are speaking to. So no need to say welcome to that person's name, but if we are in the channel, we want that to appear. Perfect. And now let's go ahead below that and add another paragraph with the class name of text-sync-600, dark, text-sync-400, text-sm, like that. And inside, go ahead and let's dynamically render. So if type is channel, in that case, go ahead and render in backticks. This is the start of the hashtag open a special object name channel, like that. Otherwise, go ahead and render backticks again. This is the start of your conversation with the person we are speaking to. So just the name, like that. There we go. So now this says welcome to general. This is the start of the general channel. If I switch to new text, it says new text, and new text here. But when we come to our members, we don't have that yet. But when we add it, it's going to say this is the start of your conversation with Antonio, and it's just going to say Antonio here without this hashtag icon. Perfect. So we just created our chat welcome component, and now we can actually go back to our chat messages and we can start actually fetching the data. So let's go and let's install the TanStack React query package. So I'm going to go inside of my terminal and I'm going to write, let's just write npm install add tanstack/react-query, like this. So install that package right here. And then make sure you do npm run dev again, like this. Now let's close everything. Just to refresh your localhost, go inside of components, go inside of providers, and create a new file called query-provider.tsx, like that. Go ahead and mark this as use client. Import query client and query client provider from add tanstack/react query, and import use state from React. Go ahead and write export const query provider, which is going to accept the children. And let's go ahead and give this children a type of react.react node, like that. Go ahead and return a query client provider, like this, and just render the children inside. Now let's go ahead and let's create a const query client is equal to use state, open an arrow function, new query client, like this. So just that, we don't need the set query client. We can just work with this and pass in the client to be the query client, like that. Perfect. So now that we have that, let's go inside of our app folder and find the global layout.tsx. And now we have to go inside of our socket provider and just wrap the children in the new query provider. So query provider from add/components/providers/query provider. So this component which we just created, like that. make sure you added the proper import from add/components providers, query provider, so not from any package. Great, and now we are ready to create the use chat query hook. So let's go ahead and do that. Go inside of hooks and create a new file, use-chat-query.ts, like that. Let's go ahead and let's import QS from query-string. Let's import use params from next/navigation. And let's import use infinite query from TanStack React query. And let's also add import use socket from add/components providers socket provider, like that. Let's create an interface chat query props, which is going to accept the query key, which is a string. It's going to accept API URL, which is a string, param key, which can either be channel ID or conversation ID, depending on whether this is used inside of one-on-one conversation or a channel, and a param value, which is a string, like that. Great. Now let's go ahead and let's write export const use chat query, like that. Go ahead and add the query key, the API URL, the param key, and the param value, like that, and just map them to chat query props, like this. There we go. And let's go ahead and return this. And now let's extract the is connected from our socket. So const is connected from use socket, like that, and const params is equal use params, like this. And now let's go ahead and let's create a function to fetch our projects. So const fetch projects, my apologies, const fetch messages, like that, is asynchronous. Go ahead and open the object page param is going to be undefined. So this is gonna be a page param is gonna be our cursor for infinite loading, right? We're gonna have to modify the API for messages for that. So get this page param, and now let's generate the URL using QS. So const URL is equal to QS.stringify URL. Let's get the base URL, which is API URL prop. The query is going to be a cursor, which is page param, and open this kind of like an array, so square brackets, and write param key, which is going to be param value, like that. So either a channel ID that we are querying the messages from, or the conversation ID that we are querying the messages from. So this way we can reuse this use chat query for both one-on-one conversation and for the channels. Great. And let's also add options here to skip null, true, like this. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and write const response is await fetch URL and return response.json, like that. Perfect. So now we have our const fetch messages function here. And now let's go ahead and let's actually write the query. So const data fetch next page has next page is fetching next page and status, all of that from use infinite query, like this. And go ahead and give it a query key, which is going to be an array and query key inside. A query function, which is going to be fetch messages, like that. And get next page param, which is going to take the last page, and is going to return last page (next cursor. So make sure to put the question mark here, because there is a possibility that the API fails and then the last page is not going to return this and your site will crash. And now we have something cool here called refetch interval. So we can do it every second by default. So this is what I was talking about. This is polling, right? So it's going to refetch all messages every second. Well, not all messages, but this specific page that we are on. So using this, you can actually enable some kind of real time for your users. This is what I was talking about. Even if your WebSocket is not working, you can still rely on this for a pretty good experience. But since we do have WebSockets, we're going to do a conditional if we are connected. So if our WebSocket is working, in that case, false. Otherwise, use the polling. So only if our WebSocket server fails, and instead of this saying live real-time updates, it says the polling issue, only then are we actually going to use the polling. Great. And now let's go ahead and let's just return all of that. So return data, fetch next page, has next page, is fetching next page, and status like that. Perfect. Great, and it seems like we actually don't need the params inside. Let's see. Yeah, let's actually remove the params. We don't need the params, and you can remove this import of params. My apologies. Great. And now let's go back to our chat messages. So components, chat messages here, and we can add that chat query here. So let's go ahead and write const object is equal use chat query from add/hooks /use chat query like that. Go ahead and pass it the query key, which we have from our props, the API URL, the param key, and the param value like that. And let's go ahead and let's extract the data, the fetch next page function, the has next page function, a boolean, is fetching next page boolean, and the overall status like this. And let's just see, I have this query key which seems to be missing from here, so let me just see what is up with that. Okay, so the query key is something we can generate from here. So go above this and just write const query key, open backticks like this, and write chat colon chat ID like that. That is going to be our query key. Perfect. And now that we have this, we can go ahead and render stuff according to this status right here. So I'm going to go ahead and write if status is loading. In that case, go ahead and return a div with the class name of flex-call flex-1 justify-center and items-center like that. And inside I'm going to render a loader2 from Lucid React. So make sure you add the loader2 from Lucid React, and let me move it there, and let me separate this two as well. Okay, and let's give this loader2 a class name of h-7w-7 text-sync-500 animate-spin and my-4 like that. And below that, let's add a paragraph which is going to say loading messages 3 dots like that, and the class name is going to be text-extra small text-sync-500 like that, and dark mode is going to use text-sync-400 like that. And there we go. You can see that now it's infinitely loading our messages. That's because we actually don't have this API URL created yet. Perfect. So now you can go ahead and copy this entire status loading and paste it below. If status is equal to error, in that case, we are not going to show this. We're going to show the server crash from Lucid React. So make sure you have that imported. And let's remove the animate spin class because we don't want our error to be spinning, right? And let's just write something went wrong like that. Perfect. And now let's just see, I'm pretty sure we're gonna get this error right now because our API route does not exist. There we go. So now it said, for a brief second, it was shown an error and it said something went wrong. Perfect. So what I want to do now is actually create that API route. So let's go inside of our app folder. Make sure you save all of these files inside of the app folder API and create a new folder called messages like that. And inside, create a new file, route.ts. So yes, this is still inside of the app folder because this is only for fetching the messages. We can do that inside of app router. Great. Let's go ahead and let's write an export asynchronous function get, which has a request, which is a type of request like this. Let's go ahead and open a try and catch block. Let's resolve the error. And inside of this error, let's go ahead and write console log messages error. Sorry, messages get like that, and pass in the error. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's your error message, right? Whatever it's easier for you to find in the terminal, and return new next response from next server internal error with a status of 500 like that. Perfect. And now let's go back inside of our try block and let's get the current profile. So profile is await current profile. So not current profile pages, but current profile, the old one, the old reliable one. Great. And now let's also import DB while we are here. So our database util. Perfect. And now let's go ahead and let's get the search params. So const search params are equal new URL request.url like that. Let's get the cursor. So const cursor is equal to search params.get cursor. Const channel ID is equal to search params.get channel ID like that. So cursor is going to be used to tell the infinite load from what message to load the next batch of messages. So there are many types of querying and pagination and loading. You can use the takes and skip method, or you can use the cursor method, for example. And for infinite loading, cursor, I think, is the preferred method, and it makes way more sense to me. Great. So now if there is no profile, let's go ahead and return new next response. Unauthorized with a status of 401 like that. Great. And now let's copy and paste this. And if there is no channel ID, in that case, next response is channel ID missing with a status of 400 like that. Let me just expand my screen a bit. Okay. And now let's go ahead and let's create. So below this channel ID, let messages to be a type of message from @prisma/client like this. Let's move it to the top and let's give it a default value. Sorry, message an array and a default value of an array like that. If we have a cursor, that means that we can query from that cursor. So messages is going to be await db.message.findMany like that. And now we have to define our message batch. So you can do whatever you want here. I'm going to create a constant here called const messages_batch. So by default, I'm going to fetch 10 by 10. So my infinite load is going to work 10 messages, then I'm going to scroll to the top, another 10 messages, then another 10 messages. You can define this to 50 if you want to, or 100, right? But for this tutorial, I'm going to use 10, right? So we see that effect. Great. So now that we have that, if we have that cursor, let's write the following. We're going to take messages batch. So we're going to take those 10. We're going to skip 1 because we don't want it to repeat the certain message that the cursor is at. Let's add the cursor. So this is built in Prisma. ID is going to be that cursor. So we are going to start from that message that we passed from the infinite query on the front end, where channel ID is channel ID, or you can use the shorthand like that. So that's the param key that we are using from that use chat query. And the channel ID value is the param value. And let's include member of each of that message. And let's also include profile of each of that member so we can properly render that message. Great. And last thing, let's order by created at descending like that, because we are going to do an infinite query. It means that we are going to do reverse messages. Great. That's if we have a cursor. But if we don't, so else, in that case, we're going to go ahead and write messages are equal to await db.message.findMany again. Take messages batch like that, where channel ID is equal to channel ID. And we are going to include the member. So no need to do the cursor thing. So member include profile true like this. And let's also order by created at, which is going to be descending because we are doing a reverse loading of messages in an infinite load. Perfect. Let's go ahead and let's add let next cursor is going to be null like that. If messages that we managed to load, so if messages.length is equal to messages batch like that, in that case, next cursor is going to be messages batch. So the last one from the batch -1.id. So we're going to create the next cursor for the next infinite load using the information of the currently fetched messages. So if the length of the new messages is 10, then we can pick the last one and get the ID. But if it happens that the messages length is lower than the messages batch, that means we've reached the end of our infinite load and no need to change the next cursor, and that's gonna tell the 10-stack React query that we've reached the end and there is no next page. Great. And let's go ahead and let's return a next response.json like this. Items are going to be our messages and next cursor is going to be the next cursor like this. Perfect. So now we have that. And I think you can already try and refresh here. And now there we go. No more errors, it seems. So let's go back to our chat messages now. So components chat messages component. And what I want to do now is I actually want to show you like a very quick way to render these messages right here. So below the chat welcome, go ahead and create a new div. This div is going to have a class name of flex-call-reverse. So this is very important. It needs to be in a reverse order, and margin top-auto like that. And inside, we're going to render the data that comes from our use chat query, like right here, which uses the infinite query inside. So we are going to write data (pages) (map) like that. We're going to get the first group of messages. Let's also get their index. Go ahead and open this. We're going to render a fragment from React. So make sure you import the fragment. So we have to import the fragment. I'm just going to move it to the top like this. We have to import it in this way because we're going to give it a key. So give this fragment a key of ID like that. A key of I. My apologies, like that. And inside, we're going to render group. So this group that we have .items.map like that. And this one is going to have a message. And this message type is going to be a message with member with profile. So let's just quickly create that type. So I'm going to go to the top and I'm going to write type message with member with profile like that. So that's going to be a message from Prisma client. Make sure you add that message from the Prisma client here. Extend it by adding and member, which is going to be a member from Prisma client. We already have that. And a profile is going to be a profile from Prisma client. So I have member, message, and profile from @Prisma /client. So make sure to create this new type, and then we can go back inside of iterating our group items here, and we can assign that to this message right here. And let's go ahead now that we have that, and we can now safely go ahead and return a div, and inside I'm gonna go and render message.content like that. And let's give this a key of message.id like this. And there we go. We can finally see our messages now. So I'm going to go ahead and write new message here. And it's not going to be immediately transmitted here because we have not set up our socket on the front end, right? So right now we still have to refresh. But when I refresh right here, there we go. It says new message right here. And if you go to another channel, you can see that this is completely empty. So this is a new channel, right? Which means that when I refresh here, only then are we going to see that. Perfect. So we are now ready to go ahead and style these messages. And after that is done, we're going to enable the socket IO on the front end, so it's real time. After that is done, we are also going to add another hook, which is going to control the scrolling of our application. So when we get a new message, we want to get scrolled down. But when we scroll up purposely to load new messages, we don't want to get interrupted by that. So we are also going to do that. Great job. So we're finally seeing some messages, and now we're going to build a message item component. So let's go ahead and let's style each of these messages right here. So instead of using this div right here, we are going to render a chat item like this. And when you save this, you should get an error because we don't have that component. So let's go ahead and let's go inside of components, chat, and create a new file, chat date-item.tsx like this. Let's mark this as use client and let's export const chat item like that and return a div saying chat item like that. Go back into the chat messages and now you can import chat item from /chat item. So the same way we did with welcome. Great. And now you should have a repeating chat item for as many times as messages you have in your database. So what I want to do is create an interface for the chat item props. So let's go inside of the chat item and let's create an interface chat item props like that. Let's give it an ID of string, a content of string, a member of type member from Prisma client. So make sure you import that. And each member is going to have a profile of type profile from Prisma client as well. We're going to have a timestamp, which is going to be a string, a file URL, which is going to be either a string or a null like this. We're going to have a deleted prop, which is going to be a boolean, a current member prop, which is going to be a member from Prisma client. So we already have it, no need to import it twice. All right. We have the current member and we're also going to have the is updated prop to be boolean like that. And the socket URL is going to be string like this. And socket query is going to be a record of a string and a string like that. Perfect. So now let's go ahead and let's assign those props. So I'm going to immediately assign the chat item props like that. And now let's go ahead and let's add all of those. So we are going to have an ID. We're going to have a content member timestamp like this. Let me just scroll a bit so you can see. We're going to have timestamp, file URL like this, deleted like that, current member like that, is updated, socket URL, and socket query like this. Great. Now let's go back inside of the chat messages and let's go ahead and assign all of those props here. So go to the chat item here in the chat messages component and let's start by giving it a current member of member. Let's also give it a key of message.id like that. Let's give it an ID of message.id while we are here. Okay, let's give it content of message.content. So let's just not misspell content like I did here. All right. Let's go ahead and let's write file URL to be message.file URL like that. Deleted is going to be message.deleted. All right. Timestamp is going to be format. So we have to add a format from date-fns. So let's quickly go inside of our terminal. I'm going to shut down my application and let's write npm install date-fns like this. And we can immediately do npm run dev on our application. Now let's go ahead to the top and let's import format, from date-fns, and let's create a constant to define the date format. So const date underscore format is going to be d mmm yyyy, another y like that, hh capital, and like this. Great. So just do it exactly like that. And now let's go all the way back to rendering of our chat item. Use format like that, new date message.created at, and use the date format like that. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and add the is updated prop. We're going to do that by comparing the message that is updated at is not equal to message.created at. So if they are not equal, obviously it was updated. And let's add the socket URL, which is going to be socket URL from the props we have, and socket query to be socket query from the URL that we have. Great. And now let's also alongside member give it alongside current member, let's also give it a member. And for that, we're going to do message.member like this. Great. So make sure you have all of the props needed like this so you don't get any errors inside. Perfect. Now let's go back inside of the chat item component. And what we can do is we can already start rendering it. So let's go ahead and let's give this div a class name of relative group flex items dash center on hover bg dash black slash 5 like that, p dash 4 transition, and w dash full like this. Okay, and let me just refresh this so I know it's up to date. All right, now inside of that, let's go ahead and let's create another div with the class name of group flex gap dash x dash 2 items dash start and w dash full like this. Okay, and now here create another div with the class name of cursor dash pointer hover drop dash shadow dash md and transition like that. Great, and inside we're gonna go ahead and render the user avatar of the person who sent this message. So import user avatar from /user avatar or /components user avatar like that. And I'm just going to separate the two, and let's give this a source of member.profile.image URL like that. So don't use the current member, instead use the member, so the person who sent the message. And now we can see my messages here. Great. Now let's go ahead outside of this div holding the avatar like that, create a new div with the class name of flex dash call and w dash full, and inside create a new div with the class name of flex items dash center and gap dash x dash 2 like that, and inside one more div, class name flex items dash center like that. And in here, we're going to create a paragraph, which is going to render member.profile.name like that. And let's go ahead and give this a class name of font-semi-bold, text-sm, hover, underline like that, and cursor-pointer like that. There we go. Great. And now let's go below this paragraph and let's add an action tooltip from /action tooltip. So make sure you add /components like that. I mean, you don't have to. And inside, for now, I'm just going to render a paragraph which says a role. And let's go ahead and let's give this tooltip a label of member.role like that. So now, when you hover over my role, it's going to say admin like this. If the person who sent the message is actually an admin, right? If it's a moderator, it's going to say moderator. So now let's quickly replace this paragraph with an actual proper component. So in order to do that, let's create a role icon map. So below the interface, outside of the chat item component, create a const role icon map, which is going to be, well, just an object. If we are a guest, in that case, null. If we are a, whoops, let's not use semicolons, but this. If we are a moderator, it's going to be, oops, shield check from Lucid React with a class name of w-4, w-4, so h-4, w-4, margin left to, and text-indigo-500. Add a comma, copy and paste this. And this one is going to be admin. And instead of shield check, it's going to be shield alert from Lucid React. So make sure you have both shield check and shield alert from Lucid React. And I'm going to separate those two. And let's change this to rows like that for the admin. Great. And now that we have the role icon map, we can go all the way to the bottom and find this paragraph which says role inside of this action tooltip and actually render the role icon map with member.role like this. There we go. And now we can see next to my name that it says that I'm an admin. Perfect. So let me just zoom out just a bit here so it looks a bit better like that. Great. Now let's go outside of this div holding the action tooltip. Let's add a span, and inside we're going to render the timestamp like this. And let's just style it by giving it a class name of text.extra small, text-sync-500, and on dark mode, text-sync-400 like that. Great. Now that we have that, let's go ahead and let's go outside of this div right here, which holds the span. And what I want to do here now is just actually render the content for now. So let me just write content like this. There we go. So now you can see the content inside. Perfect. So before we continue, I actually want to create cases for rendering an image and a PDF, right? So let's go ahead and let's add some constants here. So I'm gonna go all the way to the top to the chat item here before the return function, and let's go ahead and let's write const. So we're gonna use a bunch of this constant is admin. That's going to be current member.role is equal to member role, which you're going to import from Prisma client. So make sure you imported member role from Prisma client. So if current member is admin, like that, const is moderator, is going to be current member.role equals member role.moderator, like that. Const is owner. So if we are the owner of this message, then current member.id is going to be equal to the member ID of the message, like that. Can delete message, so const can delete message is going to be if it is not already deleted, and open brackets like this, if we are an admin, or if we are a moderator, or if we are an owner, like this. So that's the can delete message. Now const can edit message is going to be if it's not deleted, like that, and if is owner. So only an owner can edit the message, right? Not even moderators or admins can do that. That's not the practice even neither Slack or Discord follow, right? So we're just following them. Great. And one more thing I want to add, I also want to make sure that it doesn't have a file URL. So we shouldn't enable editing for PDFs or messages or image messages. Now let's write const is loading to be form. Oops, we can't do that yet. So we're going to have a form later. Let's do is PDF. So file type. We don't have the file type yet. Okay, let's go ahead and let's just quickly create a file type above everything here. So const file type is equal file URL question mark dot split find the dot pop, like that. And now we have the file type. So if file type is equal to PDF, and if we have the file URL like that, const is image is going to be if it's not PDF, and if we have a file URL. Great. So I just wanted to add a bunch of this constants here so that we can develop this easier. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and let's find where we rendered our content right here, right? So outside of here. And you can remove this content now, and let's do an is image first. So if it is an image, let's go ahead and let's render an href like this. And let me just align this like that. So the href for this one is going to be the file URL. So when the person clicks on an image, it's going to get open for them. Perfect. Let's give it a target of underscore blank. Let's give it a rel. Is it a rel? Yes. No opener, no referrer. Like that. Okay, and let's give it a class name of relative aspect dash square, like that. We're also gonna have rounded dash MD, margin top of 2, overflow is going to be hidden, it's gonna have a border, it's gonna have a flex, items dash center, BG dash secondary, like that, and H dash 48 and W dash 48, like this. So you can see that I sent one image message, so now I have this right here. So if you don't, just click on the plus icon and send a message as an image. So make sure that you do that so you can see what you're doing here. Great. And inside I'm going to render an actual image from next/image. So make sure you have imported image from next/image. Let's go down to it here. Okay, find this image. Let's go ahead and let's give the image a source of file URL. Let's give it an alt of content. Let's give it a fill, and let's give it a class name of object-cover, like this. There we go. Now you can see the image that I sent as a file here. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and let's do the same thing, but for the PDFs, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and write is PDF from the constants we made above, create a div with a class name here. So what you can actually do to save some time, we can go inside of our components and find the file upload here, right? Let me zoom out a bit and find this one. If value and file type is PDF, in that case, this is what we're gonna have, but we're just gonna remove this button, right? So I'm going to copy that. So make sure it's file and file type PDF. So just copy this. If you don't want to copy it, you can pause the video and see how it looks here, like that. Okay, and now what I'm going to do, let me see if I can expand my screen a bit more. I can, great. So let me just properly indent all of this now. So it's PDF, I'm just gonna indent it like this. I have to add the file icon from Lucid React, so make sure you have the file icon added. Okay, the href in this case is going to be file URL like this. This can say the same, and instead of rendering any value, let's write PDF file so it looks nicer in a message. And we're not gonna have this button at all, like this. There we go. Perfect. So let me just zoom out for you. If you're getting stuck here, this is how you can do it. So just this div with these classes, a file icon, which you have to import from Lucid, and an href. So I just copied it from file upload because it's exactly the same. So for us to save some time. Perfect. And you can see I have my PDF file here. So it's shown like this. And if I click on it, it's going to open. Perfect. And now that we have that, let's go ahead and let's just add some use state fields here. So I'm going to go back to the top right here. And let's set const is editing, set is